Hi, I'm Zen and welcome to this video on how to add content to a web page. The idea behind this video is that if you've already made the containers for your web page, but aren't quite sure how to add and format the content so it looks nice like this, then this is the video for you. Even though this video is going to be fairly long, we're only going to be doing a few simple things here, but it should be enough to get you going. In a few videos time, we'll be taking this a step forward and doing some more complex layouts. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on those. So let's get into it. As said, this is a fairly simple video, but with some useful tricks inside it. We're going to be populating the page that we made in our previous videos in the series, which is this one here, so that it looks like this here. If you didn't see that series of videos and you'd like to do them first before you start this video, then the link for the series should be showing up in the corner now. If you just want to follow along without doing the previous stuff, then no problem. As always, I've got your back, and just follow the link in the description below to get all the files that you need to do so, including a HTML version of the index page if you don't want to be messing about with the PHP stuff. Please note the images are in a separate link taking you to Unsplash, and that's simply because Google Drive was messing up and it was claiming 17 hours upload time for me to get the images there. If you have been following along, well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. And all you'll need to do is download the image files again from that Unsplash link for the images, as well as the Roboto font. However, if you did do the designing in Figma series as well, then you should already have these images, and it's just the Roboto font that you'll need to download from the link in the description. So we're going to be starting with the two large cards first, and the first thing I need to do is make a minor correction, because if you notice here, these are rather big cards, and this is at the same zoomed. You see these are not as high. For some strange reason, I set the card height to 83 rem, I believe, and it should not have been 83 rem. It should have been 67. So a slight continuity issue there. I do apologize, not quite sure how that happened, but that's in the card CSS. You just want to update that straight away, and then we are good to carry on. There you go. You can see it's now the right height. So let's have a look at what we're trying to make, okay, which is this, but let's have a look at it in Figma. So here we see basically our top card, we have an image and 2 bits of text. And the second card is basically the same, but with the image on the right hand side. We can essentially do this in one of 2 ways. Well, okay, we can do it in more than 2 ways, but we're just going to look at the 2 main ones for the moment. Method 1 would be to have 3 main elements, one for the image, one for the title, and one for the body of the text. The second method is to have 2 main sections, one for the image, one for the block of text, which in itself has 2 children, one for the title, and one for the body. Both methods are absolutely fine, but I'm going to go with the second method simply because I think it makes it easier for me when I want to convert this into a grid-based system. As I said before, we've got one image here on the left and one image on the right, which means in order for us to be able to do this little trick, the images themselves are going to need to have a modifier class attached to them. So let us go and add these images in now. So here we are in the index.php page. If you're following along with the HTML page, then this should look almost the same, with just without these PHP bits in it. The first thing I want to make clear that we've got the images in the images folder. Okay, make sure you've put them in the right folder. Otherwise, our referencing system is not going to work. So when we create our images, we're going to give them 2 classes. One which is card _large _img for image. And then the second class will be the same, but with the left or right modifier attached to them. As said, our images are going to have 2 classes attached to them. First one's going to be the card large image class, and then the second one, it's just going to be card image left and card image right. And so this is what the code should look like. The reason why we don't have the large word in the second class being applied is because it then gives us the ability to apply this rule to any image in any card that we want left or right aligned. As always, we should always save our file and test it to see how it comes out. And as we can see, this is not what we were expecting. The reason for this is really simple. The images we are using here are absolutely massive, especially in comparison to the size of the web page. Now, make this bit very clear. All images should have been resized and optimized prior to being used on a website. These images are purposely very large, so I can illustrate why this should be the case and how to fix it in another video. Okay, so time to resize them. So looking at a designing figure, we can see that the image is meant to be 650 pixels high, 65 RAM, and 440 pixels wide. It also has rounded corners like the card. We're going to put this code into the cards CSS because it is a image rule for the cards. So here is the rule for the large image. Notice it's at the bottom of the card CSS, and these are the simple rules that we're applying to it. So just pause the video until you finish copying. All done? Okay, let's see what it looks like. So here we are, we're just going to refresh it, and we can see it fits in perfectly. However, although it's not as clear on this one, it's very clear on this image that the image has been distorted. As we can see, the images have been squished and stretched in order to fit into the size it's been designated. Now, to get around this, in the past, there were loads of complex solutions to this, such as creating image masks, editing the image in Photoshop first, before using it on the site, and many more. However, luckily, there is now a lovely trick that we can use, and it's been available in all the major browsers since about 2016, and that is the object fit attribute. And in that attribute, we're going to give it the value of cover. So let's jump back into the CSS. And here you can see the object fit cover. So let's see what that has done to our image. We do a refresh, and as you can see, it looks far more natural. Yes, this guy gets clipped out a little bit, but I think that is a price worth paying. Now the images are almost spot on. Well, almost spot on, because this second image does need to be on the right hand side. We won't do this now so that we can see why we need to when we hit the problem if we don't. If that makes sense. I hope it does. If not, you'll soon see why. Now it's time to add that text. So here we have our parent text section with the class of card, large, and text. Underneath that, we have the H2 for the title with a class of card, large, title. And we've also got the title already put in. And below that, we have a paragraph with a class of card, large, detail. And as you can see down here, it is repeated, but obviously with the different title. As always, we should save this and see what it looks like. So when we view this page, it's like, well, what's going on? And we can see that the actual text is here. And actually, there are two mistakes I've got here, as I've just checked. The first one was done on purpose. The second one is that looking at the CSS from the developer's console, we've actually got the color of our text set to white, and I think it's going to be the tertiary color, black. So we need to correct that so we can actually see the text. So let's just quickly do that. So here we are in the card CSS, and it's this mistake up here. You see the background color is secondary color. This one should have been set for the tertiary color. Quick refresh, and now we can actually see the text. Okay, so obviously we don't want the text underneath the image, and the question is, why is it underneath the image? And it's also a good time to note that how the min height attribute that we used in the previous video works in here, because it's actually increased the height of the card in order to hold that text for us. Why is this text below here? You may be thinking it is actually because of the image acting as a block level element. And now we can check this by using the developer's console by pressing F12 on our browser and coming down to the image itself, which is here. Now, as you can see, the image has got one rem margin around it, which is 10 pixels, and it's got nothing to do with the text. If we move down to the section, we can actually see how the section is taking up the whole side, okay, the whole width of the card. And so this is actually due to the text, not due to the image, because sections, the H2 and the paragraph tags are all block level elements. Therefore, they do not want to share their line with other elements. Now, we could modify these elements to make them work alongside the image, but it's actually easier to modify the images, especially considering that we want to have this image on the right hand side. And so we are going to be using the float attribute for this. The beauty of the float attribute is that it allows an element to share the line with other elements, but also from what side we want it to be sharing from. So let's go ahead and do it. So at the bottom here, you can see we've just added two simple rules, the image left and image right with their floating values. And again, we're going to save this. We're going to go back to the web page and refresh it. And straight away, we can see that not only have we got the images in the right place, but the text has moved to the top as well. If we actually had tried to float the text, we probably would have found the text would have been nestled in the bottom, which is another issue that we would have had to deal with. Okay, so now we're actually going to want to format the title. And this opens up quite an important question. Where should we put the CSS for formatting the title? Initially, you might think that we should put it in card CSS, as it is a title within the card system. But it's also an H2 tag, which means maybe it should be in the base CSS, since we'll probably want a consistent look for this type of element across the site. What do you think? Pause this video while you think it over. Why not put your response in the comments below? And my answer or my solution is coming up in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first off, let's make this clear. There is no right or wrong answer. It is down to personal preference. My solution is to split it. I'm going to create a CSS rule in base CSS as a default H2 rule, then apply some tinkering for this in this particular scenario in cards CSS. This isn't perfect and would probably mean that using card CSS in another site would require some additional tinkering of the CSS, but that's my decision. And as I said before, think I'm right, think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. So here we are in base CSS, and as you can see, I've put this rule below the body tag and before my classes. And as you can see, I have set the font family, which is going to be that syncopate font, the font weight, just to make it a little bit lighter. Okay, so font weight 300 rather than 400 being the standard. We set the color to the primary color, which in this case is that green. We've set the font size to 3 rem, which is 30 pixels with this font resetter. And we've set a padding at the top of 1 rem, which is 10 pixels. So let's do a cheeky save and a quick refresh to see how it looks. As we can see, these changes in the CSS rules make a phenomenal difference to it overall. The only thing we really want to do here is to actually move the title so that it's in the center. And that is the rule that we're going to be putting into the cards CSS. Now, where do we put this rule in the cards CSS? Do we put it underneath the card large? Well, this is again down to preference. I'll try to put all the top level elements together and then these below. So I'm going to put this actually below my image for the large card rule here. And there is our simple rule. So again, let's quickly save it and have a look. And you could say that looks pretty spot on. If we compare it to the Figma design, you can see here, just zoom into it, that looks pretty much perfect. Now time to add the normal text. For this, we're going to be using Lorem text because we don't actually have the right text to put in. And this is by far not ideal, but if you're going to be putting in fake text, using Lorem is definitely the best way to go around it. Ideally, you should always try and make sure you've actually got the right text to put in, because that allows you to do things such as resizing it and adding different color shades if need be. However, Lorem is a good savior for when you don't have that. So this is the Lorem code that I'm using. So I'm going to create 2 lots of Lorem text and then add a new line to it. I'm going to repeat that 3 times, then add an additional line to it to simulate the looking of a paragraph, and then times that by 2 to give me 2 paragraphs. And as you can see, it creates a lot of text for us. So as always, let's save and check this. This is not looking too great. The reason for this is because so far we have neglected the requirement for the normal text for the site. And rightly so, it's now time to fix that. From the download at the start of this video, you should have downloaded the Roboto fonts. Okay, and so that's the first thing we need to do, is to actually declare them like we have with the syncopate font, just like so. Now, important to note that these rules are based on the idea that we are in base CSS and that the fonts are actually in a folder called fonts inside the CSS folder. If you're not sure how these rules work, please do check the fonts video, which should be showing up in the corner right about now, which should explain it all for you. It also seems like in our root declaration, we've already got the primary font here set to Roboto. If it's not in yours, now will be the perfect time to add it, as well as the semicolon that should be there. Finally, we need to add the rules into the body. So here we've now set the font family to the primary font, set the size to 1.4 rem, which is 14 pixels, and set the color to the tertiary, which is black. So now we save that, and time for another preview. And now it's looking a lot better. So let's repeat this for the next large time. Now, as you may notice here, this is slightly different from the previous rule. I always think it's a good idea to have the text slightly different. It makes it look a little bit more realistic. And again, another save and another view. So here we have this on the preview, and we can see that the text isn't as good as what we thought it was. As we can see here, how it is hugging the left-hand edge of the card, and that's not very nice. It's not so obvious on the first card because of the 1 rem margin around the image keeps it away, and the right-hand edge, not much text ever gets to the end apart from this facade. The solution to this is very simple. We're going to add a 1.5 rem margin around the left and right sides of the text. So let's put that in. So this is a rule that we add, and in fact you can see we're adding a margin to all 4 sides, not just to the left and right. So as always, we're going to save and preview it, and that does look a lot better. However, those of you that are eagle-eyed would have noticed that there was no difference between the image and the text. And you may think this is something to do with margin collapse that we looked at in the previous video, and we will see this by looking at the developers tools. So here we are in the developers tools, and as you see, we've got the section here. We move down to the image, and we see that the image itself has the margin that we talked about before, the 1 rem or 10 pixel margin. When we move down to the actual card text itself, notice how it actually spans all the way across. And again, this is all part of the issue with the float that we talked about before. It's just interesting to see that despite the card working its way all the way across, it still respects that floating margin from the image. And that is why it doesn't change. In order to get the space between the image and the text to be larger, we'd have to increase the margin on the image and not the text. But I'm happy with how it is, so we shall leave it at that. On the right hand side here, we can see the text has moved away from the right hand edge, as it has done here as well, making it look a lot better than it did before. These are small, subtle changes, but can make a big difference to the overall appearance of your website. Now it's time to move on to the medium cards. Now, looking at Figma, we have the images and some basic text that we've got to create. Now, there are basically 4 ways that we could do this. The first would be layering. We could create 3 elements: the image, the banner, and then the text. And then we could use the Z index to layer them on top of each other. The second method is a variation of the first, by only creating 2 layers, having the image as the bottom layer and then having the text as the layer above it, but using the background attribute to create the banner effect. The third option is what a lot of people do, which is just go into their favorite graphics editor and make it as a single image and then just add that as an image onto the card itself. The fourth method, and the one we're going to use, is to make the image the background to the card and then add text to that card, and then use the text background property to create the banner look. Because these images are going to be acting as backgrounds to the cards, the actual code for this is done in the CSS file, and not in the index PHP or HTML file. So time to add these background images. So here we have the code for the background images. It's important to note that the address for the images is relative to the CSS file, not the HTML or PHP file. So this is why we've got the ... in front of the address, because we have to go out of the CSS folder, okay, because that's where we are. So we have to go out to CSS folder and then back into the images folder. So the ... is to go up a level. And then as you can see, we've got our 3 images. First one's Nathan, second one's Jonathan Pye, and the third one is the Ian Keith. So now it's time to go and view this in the actual page. So here we are looking at in the actual live page, and it's probably not what you were hoping to see. Looks like the first one hasn't changed at all, which makes us think that it might be a bad link. And the others are, well, let's be honest, quite interesting to look at. The reason for this is really simple. All the images are actually there. The problem is that, again, the images are so large that when we're seeing it at 100%, we're seeing such a small portion of it, it looks like it's something completely different. Now, if you remember, when we did it up here in the large card, we used the object fit rule to resize the images and to get them look good. That doesn't actually work with a background image. Luckily, there is one called background size, which will do it for us. And we can also use the contain and cover rules, which we used with the large images. So let's first use the contain value on all 3 and see what happens. So this is a code that you need to add, just background size contain. You see we've done it on all 3 of the cards. And now when we jump into the page itself and we do a false refresh with Control and F5, we can see it gives us an unusual result. It works perfectly for the first card, and this is because the aspect ratio of the image matches that of the card basically perfect. Although there's a small bit down here, but most people aren't going to see that. So the cover rule works really well if the aspect ratio matches perfectly. However, as we can see for these 2, it is much more obvious that it did not work, because the image we're using for the wolf one is actually the completely different aspect ratio. It's a landscape rather than portrait. We actually get a repeat of the image. And then on the third one, where it looks like it's almost perfect, we get a tiled effect. So next thing to do is to try to use the cover rule instead. So we change them all to cover to see what actually happens here. And again, we save, refresh the browser, and you can see that we lose that little white bit at the bottom of the card. So that looks better for the first card. The third card is basically perfect. It looks exactly what we wanted to do. The second card, we can see we've got a small issue, in that although it has solved the double image, our little wolf is in the wrong place. To fix this, we're going to use the background position attribute rule that we can use, and what we're going to do is just to move the background image 200 pixels to the left hand side. As you can see here, we are using background position X, so we only have to worry about the X position. If we did background position, we could do -200 and then leave the second value alone, and it would have left as its default, or we could have given it a value of center just to get it where we wanted to. But just using background position X is absolutely fine. And so when we save it and view it, we can see Mr. Wolf is exactly where we want him to be. Or Mrs. Wolf, I don't know. So now it's time to add the text so that we can, see it. So here is the text that we need to add. Notice we're using the H3 tags rather than the H2 that we used in the large ones. Do be careful in the placement of your code. It can be very easy to drop it into somewhere like here, for example, where it's not inside the actual card. The way to check is make sure that your card is the front. Okay, it's inside the front of the card. And there's 3 of them. Do take note of the BRs as well. These are important, as we'll see why in a moment. Okay, so once you cover that, as usual, we save it and then we view it. And sometimes we need to do a hard refresh, but it's come out okay. And here we can see the text showing up and not looking very nice at the moment. So obviously we're going to use some CSS to start making it look pretty. The first thing we're going to do is to hijack the H2 rules, because a lot of the stuff that we have formatting for the H2 rule is perfect for the H3. So that is in the base CSS file. So although I call it hijacking, it's not really. It's just a way of being able to use the same rule for multiple elements. So all we need to do is put in a comma. Now I like putting in a new line just to make it easier for me to be able to see exactly what rules are being applied. But here now, both H2 and H3 all have the same rules. And we can check this by again saving, opening up our page and refresh it. Now again, you may need to do Control F5 to force the refresh. And as you can see, that makes a huge difference on its own. Of course, there are some additional things that we need to do, and that is what we're going to be changing. And we shall do that in the cards CSS. So just a quick recap, the class that we added to the H3 was card medium text. And this is the rules that we need to make for it. Okay, so we've changed the color to secondary color, which is white. We've changed the background color to the primary color transparent, so it's got that faded green. We've actually increased the font size to 3.5 rem rather than the 3 rem that is in the large card. And we have centered aligned the text. So again, a save and a preview. And we can see we have got huge differences, making it very close to, in fact, how we want it to appear. Now, when we compare it against our original idea in Figma, we can see that it has dropped down a little bit more in Figma, and it's got these margins, or actually these are paddings that we're going to add to the top and bottom of the text. So it is these two additional rules that we needed, a margin top of 6 rem and a padding top and bottom 4 rem, but no left and right padding. So once again, we save this and we review it. And as we can see, that is almost a perfect copy of what we see in Figma. Okay, that is more than good enough. In fact, if we actually look at the nose, look at that, it's just above the black on the nose there, and it's just above the black on the nose there. That couldn't get more accurate if I tried. Probably could try, but I'm not going to. That is nigh on perfect. Now, the important thing to understand here is that the reason why this padding worked consistently across the 3 cards was because there are 4 lines on each card, okay, in each of the text. This is why there's this additional break here in the jungle tracks to make sure there are still 4 actual lines. The reason why I'm telling you this is because it is your big challenge time. So listen up. You have to do the 4 small cards on your own. And it's a bit unfair because they are in fact the 4 hardest cards to do. Just showing you the finished example of what you're aiming for. Okay, so first of all, stage 1 is to do the background images. Just so you know, this one here is the Kyle Glenn. This is the Hugh Chan, Jonathan Forage, and Tim Mossholder. Okay, so those are the 4 images that you need to put in. The second part of this will obviously be doing the text, and this is where it gets a little bit harder, because if you notice, we have different lines of text. So 1 in this one, 2 in these 2, and 3 lines on this one. Which means in order to get the padding correct, what you're going to need to do is to give each of your text a unique class so that you can apply a unique padding onto each one. My hint for you is to work on the one with the 3 lines and then move yourself backwards. Now, just a little warning, whilst you're doing this, you may find that the vertical alignment of these cards will actually move out, okay? It'll go a little bit weird. Don't worry about that, it's not you. And when I show you the answers, I'll show you how to deal with that as well. So just concentrate on trying to make the cards look good. Don't worry about their vertical alignment. So I recommend you pause the video now, as I'm going to start showing you how to do this in 3, 2, 1, now. Okay, so this is the code that we need for the images. So this is stage 1. As you can see, we're just using the standard background image rules, and then we're using cover. And as you can see here, for the camping one, in order to get the image into the correct place, I've actually used background position. Like I said before, I could have just used background position Y, unit -205, but I thought I'd show you how to do it if you're just doing it on background position. So first value here is 0, it's the X, -205 is the Y value. So let's just check that this looks correct. So as you can see, the images are exactly the way I want them to be, looking very nice and smooth for us. So let's move on to stage 2. Now stage 2 actually is also done in 2 parts. First bit is obviously adding the text into the index page and making sure that we've given them the correct classes. So here is the HTML that we need. Again, be careful where you actually put this code, and it is in the front of the card and not in the back. And also note that, say we've got the card small text class as well as the individual ones, so forest, mountain, camping, and kite. Notice as well, I'm still using the H3 tag as I did with the medium cards. So let's see what this looks like. And this is where you see things start going a bit weird, how we're getting this stepping effect with the card. Now, this is actually to do with the H3 tags and the BRs within them, as far as I can tell. Personally, I don't think these should have any influence on where they are positioned, but for some reason it does, and it's consistent across all the browsers. So whether or not it's a fault in the HTML spec or its implementation, I don't know, but it is a bit silly. However, luckily, the solution for this is really simple, and it's about adding a vertical align attribute to the small card rule. So here's the card small rule, and this is the vertical align attribute I was talking about. I use text top. You probably could get away with top as well, but because it's a text, I like text top. And again, we save that, we go back to the page and we refresh, and there we go. You can see they're all nicely vertically aligned again. It's a really weird quirk, and one that you'll come across a lot and won't realize why. So now it's time to actually format the text so it looks correct. And like we did before, we're going to hijack a rule we made earlier. And I know, like I said, it's not really hijacking, but it makes me feel good calling it that. So here we are in card CSS, and if you remember, we did this medium card text rule. And like I said, all we're going to do now is to add on to it. Okay, and we can save that and then view it. And we can see that we are getting very close. Obviously, it's too big and there's a lot of work that we need to do, but it is on the right track. As I said before, we're going to focus on the kite surfing one and get that one correct, and then work our way backwards. And so we're going to do this rule actually on the small card text rule itself. So here is the card small text rule. Okay, so basically what we've done here is we put this below this one here so that these will override these ones. As you can see, we've reduced the font size to 2.5 rem. We put in a margin top of 5 rem rather than the 6 rem it's already got, and we're only adding a half a rem top padding, which makes it 5 pixels, and no padding to the left and right. So again, we save this and view it, and we can see that this is looking really good. In fact, no more changes is required for the kite surfing because it looks pretty much spot on for us. And like I said before, what we're going to do now is to work our way backwards to deal with the mountain climbing and camping holidays one. Since these both have 2 lines, that means we can use a CSS rule for both of them. So this is a rule that we require in order to get the padding for those 2 cards to work. As you can see, it's a padding of 2.25 rem. Just giving you this value is no good on its own. You need to understand where it comes from. So each line of text takes up 2.5 rem because that's the rule that we gave it. Since these 2 have 2 lines of text each, okay, that is 5 rems. And the kite one had 3 lines of text, which is 7.5 rems. So these are in effect 2.5 rems short of the 3-line kite. So we split that number 2.5 rem into 2, and that gives us 1.25 rem. We then got to add the 0.5 rem padding, which is on all of them anyway, as we can see here. So that takes it from 1.25 to 1.75 rem. However, there's also something called leading, and that is roughly half a rem. You know, that's 5 pixels. This is a guesstimate that worked for me. Depending on the fonts that you're using, you may need to use a different leading value. So we add that 0.5 onto the 1.75, which gives us 2.25 rem. So again, we'll save this and view it, and we can see that the mountain and camping text is now as good as it's going to be. It may not be 100% spot on, but no one's going to be complaining about that. You know, you may find that actually it's 0.6 of a rem or something like that for the leading, but I think that is more than enough or close enough for us. And that just leaves us with the forest track. So our forest track is missing 2 lines at 2.5 rems each, so that's 5 rems. Plus, now don't forget, it's 2 lots of leading, because we've got that one and that one there. So that is 1 rem on top, so that is 6 rem. It is short, divided by 2, that's 3 rem top and bottom, plus the 0.5 that we added onto this one anyway. So that gives us 3.5 rem padding for the top and bottom. And you can see the rule here as it should be. Notice where I put it. I still like to put it below the small text one because it's the first card that we see. So again, we save it and we view it and look at that. Consistent, lovely design. And now if we scroll out, and you can see we are truly done here. All the cards are well aligned. We've got consistent design. Our job here is done. In the next video, we will be adding the advert that we forgot about at the start. Now, we didn't really forget about it, but we're going to save it for the last because we've got some interesting things that we need to do. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. So, thank you for staying with me all the way. As always, if there's a video you want me to do, or if you want a shout out on one of the future videos, or just want to ask me anything, please whack it in the comments section below, as I do read every comment and I do want to hear how to make my videos better for you. See you guys next time. I'm Zen, signing off.